terbaik, inspirasi, tebarkan harapan. Kampus terbaik, inovasi, wujudkan impian. Kampus terbaik, integritas, kuatkan tujuan. Kampus terbaik, beri terbaik untuk negeri, untuk dunia, umat manusia dan alam semesta. Mari bersama hadirkan masa depan dalam langkah dan pikiran agar selalu terdepan, berbekal ilmu dan jiwa pengabdian. Deras arus zaman takkan tertahan, majulah melangkah, oh majulah. Kampus terbaik, inspirasi, tebarkan harapan. Kampus terbaik, inovasi, wujudkan impian. Kampus terbaik, integritas, kuatkan tujuan. Kampus terbaik, beri terbaik untuk negeri, untuk dunia, umat manusia dan alam semesta. Mari bersama hadirkan masa depan dalam langkah dan pikiran agar selalu terdepan, berbekal ilmu dan jiwa pengabdian. Deras arus zaman takkan tertahan, majulah melangkah, oh majulah. Terus berpacu dalam keunggulan, lincah pembelajar untuk kehidupan. Inilah semangat baru, tekad raih kesempatan, wujudkan kampus terbaik selamanya.
Mari bersama hadirkan masa depan dalam langkah dan pikiran agar selalu terdepan, berbekal ilmu dan jiwa pengabdian. Deras arus zaman takkan tertahan, majulah melangkah.
Mari bersama hadirkan masa depan dalam langkah dan pikiran agar selalu terdepan, berbekal ilmu dan jiwa pengabdian. Deras arus zaman takkan tertahan, majulah melangkah, oh majulah. Wujudkan kampus terbaik selamanya. Wujudkan kampus terbaik selamanya. Wujudkan kampus terbaik selamanya. Wujudkan kampus terbaik selamanya.
Ayo masuk IPB, ayo masuk IPB. Ayo masuk IPB, ayo masuk IPB. Ayo masuk IPB, ayo masuk IPB. Ayo masuk IPB, ayo.
Selamat datang di IPB University, kampus hijau penuh prestasi, dinamis dan penuh karya, unggul akademik dan risetnya.
University Bogor, lokasinya teduh suasananya. Bertemu teman dari seluruh Nusantara, Jawa, Sumatera hingga Papua. Kita bersama raih asa seluasnya, gapai cita bersama banggakan orang tua. Now we are here again, cause IPB Nation. Satu IPB untuk satu nation. Haha, come on.
Berpadu satu raih asa, bersama kita raih cinta.
Yakinkan hati untuk berdedikasi. Tunggu apa lagi? Tunggu apa lagi? Tunggu apa lagi?
Ayo
Kampus terbaik, inspirasi, tebarkan harapan. Kampus terbaik, inovasi, wujudkan impian. Kampus terbaik, integritas, kuatkan tujuan. Kampus terbaik, beri terbaik untuk negeri, untuk dunia, umat manusia dan alam semesta. Mari bersama hadirkan masa depan dalam langkah dan pikiran agar selalu terdepan, berbekal ilmu dan jiwa pengabdian. Deras arus zaman takkan tertahan, majulah melangkah, oh majulah. Kampus terbaik, inspirasi, tebarkan harapan. Kampus terbaik, inovasi, wujudkan impian. Kampus terbaik, integritas, kuatkan tujuan. Kampus terbaik, beri terbaik untuk negeri, untuk dunia, umat manusia dan alam semesta. Mari bersama hadirkan masa depan dalam langkah dan pikiran agar selalu terdepan, berbekal ilmu dan jiwa pengabdian. Deras arus zaman takkan tertahan, majulah melangkah, oh majulah. Terus berpacu dalam keunggulan, lincah pembelajar untuk kehidupan. Inilah semangat baru, tekad raih kesempatan, wujudkan kampus terbaik.
depan dalam langkah dan pikiran agar selalu terdepan berbekal ilmu dan jiwa pengabdian. Deras arus zaman takkan tertahan, majulah melangkah.
Mari bersama hadirkan masa depan dalam langkah dan pikiran agar selalu terdepan berbekal ilmu dan jiwa pengabdian. Deras arus zaman takkan tertahan, majulah melangkah, oh majulah. Wujudkan kampus terbaik selamanya. Wujudkan kampus terbaik selamanya. Wujudkan kampus terbaik selamanya. Wujudkan kampus terbaik selamanya.
Ayo masuk IPB, ayo masuk IPB. Ayo masuk IPB, ayo masuk IPB. Ayo masuk IPB, ayo masuk IPB. Ayo masuk IPB, ayo
Selamat datang di IPB University, kampus hijau penuh prestasi, dinamis dan penuh karya, unggul akademik dan risetnya.
Ayo masuk IPB, kampus terbaik penuh inovasi, berintegritas dan berhiasi. Tunggu apa lagi? Ayo masuk IPB.
Beragam fakultasnya, asri dan jauh lingkungannya.
3, 2, 1, go. Here we go. Welcome to IPB University Bogor, lokasinya teduh suasananya. Bertemu teman dari seluruh Nusantara, Jawa, Sumatera hingga Papua. Kita bersama raih asa seluasnya, gapai cita bersama banggakan orang tua. Now we are here again, call us IPB Nation. Satu IPB untuk satu nation. Haha, come on.
Berpadu satu raih asa, bersama kita raih kita.
Yakinkan hati untuk berdedikasi. Tunggu apa lagi? Tunggu apa lagi? Tunggu apa lagi?
Ayo
Oke, baik. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, best wish for all of us. Welcome to second day of parallel session Isotoba 2026 International Seminar organized by the Directorate of Strategic Studies and Academic Reputation of IPB University in collaboration with Asosiasi Reproduksi Hewan Indonesia and New Mexico State University, USA. Thank you very much to all the presenters and participants for joining us today. Also, I want to welcome our moderator for today's session, Ibu Ima Kusumanti SPI MSC. Thank you for coming today, Ibu. Please let me introduce myself. My name is Dini and I will be the master of ceremony for this parallel session under the subtheme Innovative Technologies in Bioresource Science and Engineering. Before we begin, please allow me to explain a few important rules for this session. One, each Zoom room will host the MC, moderator, invite speakers, presenters, and audience member. Two, all presenters are required to attend every session of the conference until the end of the parallel session. Three, co-authors are welcome to join the conference without register. Four, all participants, presenters, and audience must complete a presence form for each session, which will be shared via a Google Form link in the chat box. Five, the MC will open its present, present, presentation session, which will then be led by the moderator. Six invite speakers will have a total of 15 minutes, consisting of 10 minutes for their presentation and 5 minutes for Q&A session. Seven, each presenter will have 10 minutes in total, with 5 to 7 minutes allocated for video playback and the remaining time for the Q&A session. 8. Live presentation from presenters will not be accepted. 9. Participants are encouraged to keep their microphone mute while video are being played. 10. During the Q&A session, participants may share their opinions or ask questions by raising their hands or writing in the chat box. The moderator will invite them to speak in turn. Okay, before we start the presentation, I want to invite all of the participants in the Zoom to turn on the camera because we will take some picture of this session. And the committee please help to take photo. Okay. Okay. Let's start from the first slide. 3, 2, 1. Okay, thank you to audience. We will now present the main agenda. Before that, let me introduce the moderator for today's session. Our moderator in this session is Ibu Ima Kusumanti, SPI MSc, is a lecturer of Vocational School IPB University. She is research expert in sustainable aquaculture practice, fisheries management, and seafood processing. Without further ado, I invite Ibu Ima Kusumanti SPI MSc to lead our presentation session. Ibu Ima, please, the time is yours.
Okay, thank you, Miss Dini. Am I audible? Miss Dini, can you hear my voice clearly?
Yes, Ibu.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for introducing and good morning all the participants and also the committee of ISOTOBAT, the International Seminar on Tropical Bioscience, Bioresources, Advance and Technology 2026. So I'll be your moderator for the today's session. So we will start with the first speaker, the first presentation. It's Mr. Gagas Afdal Madani. Mr. Erizal Heriansyah Putra, and the topic is about the effectiveness of the calcite precipitation method examined through variation in sand soil density. Hello, Mr. Gagas.
Yes.
Ibu, mohon maaf, ini untuk invite speaker terlebih dahulu.
Oh yeah, okay. Sorry for the inconvenience. So the first topic, the first session, we will have the invited speaker in the session. So we already have our speaker, Dr. Abdul Hakim Muhammad Yusuf from the University Technology Malaysia. Good morning, sir. Hello.
Hello, morning, Ibu Ima.
Hello, Mr. Abdul. Yeah, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you. So for this session, we will hear from his speaker, and the topic is about the it's about the innovative in bioresources and science and engineering. So before we start, I would like to read the short biography of Dr. Abdul Hakim. So his expertise in biodegradable metals, and then also expert in biocorrosion, material chemistry, and metal polymers interface. So without further ado, I would like to invite Abdul Hakim.
Okay. So thank you very much for the MC, right? And also the moderator, Ibu Ima Kusumanti. So first of all, I want to check, am I audible? All of you can hear my voice clearly?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Okay, so let me share my slide directly. Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and good morning to everyone. Okay, so dan salam sejahtera kepada semua bapa-bapa, ibu-ibu di Indonesia dan juga di mana-mana kita berada lah. Okay, so first of all, I would like to thank a big thank to Isotobat Secretariat teams, and also to IPB, and also to all of the organizer for this third Isotobat punya international seminar for inviting me as a speaker for this prestigious event. Okay, so basically that as introduced by the moderator. My name is Abdul Hakim Mat Yusof. And now I'm at Department of Material Manufacturing and Industrial Engineering, University Technology Malaysia. So as introduced by the moderator just now, I will talk about the current status or current development of biodegradable metals in biomedical applications. So basically that I'm not so expert in this, field, but I'm just sharing what I have learned, what I have experienced about this topic, about this field. Since my master's, I start to involved in these biodegradable metals since my master in 2011. So this topic will be in the under the theme of innovative technologies in bioresource science and engineering. Okay, so basically that what are biodegradable metals? Okay, what are biodegradable metals? So maybe some of us, okay, maybe some of us do not familiar, okay, with these biodegradable metals. Yeah, because everybody have their own field, right? Their own research field or study field. Okay, okay. So biodegradable metals are the metals, okay, are the metals that are engineered or are designed to be safely degraded and to be used inside the body and to be safely degraded, and then maybe some of them will be safely excreted to the outside of our body lah. Okay, okay. And they have their own function. Why we put it inside our body is to have their own function lah. Okay, function. And basically that, okay, the key characteristic that make these biodegradable metal are still, relevant to be used until today, and also to be, commercialized until up to this point is due to its biocompatibility. Okay, the metal should not have, should not pose a harmful effect to the surrounding tissue, and also should have control degradation rates. Okay, so that's why it is implied. Okay, so that's why it is applied, and also should have adequate mechanical properties, especially for the place aside, okay, inside our body that need high bearing punya implant, for example. And also the most important thing is on all the release ions or corrosion products should be safely undergone efficient process to be eliminated from that side of body lah, that side of implantation, for example. Okay, so why we call it scientists? Why scientists start to innovate the biodegradable metals? Okay, biodegradable metals. Okay, so we are also having the biodegradable polymers and also the use of non-degradable ceramics in biomedical applications. Okay, okay, because now we are talking about the biodegradable implants, biodegradable metal application in science and bioengineering, biomedical engineering application. Okay, so why? Okay, it is why the biodegradable metal are innovated? Because of in order to avoid the first, we call it as second removal surgery lah. Second removal surgery means that, for example, if we are having fractured bone, so after certain time, okay, our bone already in a good health ataupun already functioning well, okay, completely healed, for example. So okay, in current implant, for example, okay, the implant will be still there until we die, for example. So why not the scientists think that after the bone, for example, already completely healed, so why not this implant will be eliminated or will be absorbed ataupun will be dissolved inside our body. Okay, because you know that there are many reports that show that the long-term permanent implantation, for example, okay, inside our body give a harmful effect, right? So we are trying to basically to lower the risk of any bad effect or infections, okay, due to this long-term. If we use this long-term, okay, permanent implantation. Okay, basically that there are three biodegradable metals that have been vigorously researched, okay, up to now lah, okay. They are magnesium, zinc, and iron-based material, okay, be it composite or alloys, okay. So in history that iron is the first biodegradable metal that have been used back to 1775, okay, through the iron wire over here, okay, as you can see over here. And then in 2012, okay, Magnetic, the first biodegradable screw, have been commercialized. Okay, Magnetic is the magnesium alloy. Okay, and then so basically that this Magnetic punya commercialization ni is a proof, okay, very strong proof that proof or indicate the successful innovation of the biodegradable metal in clinical application. Okay, among these three, they have different properties: mechanical, corrosion, and biocompatibility. For example, magnesium. Magnesium, it has a very rapid corrosion. Magnesium and also the magnesium-based alloy, for example, it has a very rapid corrosions. Okay, however, their strength very low lah. Okay, and for iron-based also, iron-based will be the opposite to the magnesium. It's having very, very slow corrosions. So my research, okay, from my master until until now is on iron, where I'm trying to expedite the corrosion rate because corrosion rate is very slow in vitro lah. However, okay, iron offers the highest strength. For example, its strength in terms of tensile strength, for example. Zinc base is the newest, is the the newcomer among the three. Zinc base is the newcomer, having the moderate moderate corrosion rate, which is also interesting to be explored. And also we have other metal, okay, for example, manganese, calcium, and also that also can be alloy, okay, to this main three. Okay. Now we move to the application of the biodegradable metal in biomedical technologies. Okay, basically these are four common applications, which is for biodegradable bone fixation, and also for the stent coronary for the cardiovascular implants, and also biodegradable also can be used as a drug delivery carrier. Okay. And also, okay, one of the most popular application for biodegradable metal are as the bone scaffolds. Okay, so I'm involved a lot in this number 4 application. Okay. However, okay, seems times is getting progress. Okay, and we are now entering more advanced technologies era. Okay, we are having AI, something like that. So we now this field having 3 emerging applications. For example, we have nano vehicles. Okay, biodegradable metal also are used in nano vehicles. Okay, as for example, bioimaging for cancer targeting, drug delivery, and also okay, biosensor and nano sensor also now is made from the biodegradable metals. Okay. And also, okay, the more one of the most intriguing application is that self-power biodegradable battery. So since that the biodegradable metals, okay, it degrades, right? It degrades by itself, that by themselves. For example, magnesium, for example, when it degrades, so it will produce current density, right? So from the current density itself, okay, we can get the power output right, from the current density that flow on the metal itself. Okay, so from that we take advantage of the power output to form a okay, we call it a self-power battery. Okay, these are some applications, current applications of biodegradable metals. Okay, in current literature, as you can see where we have the zinc. We are having over here zinc air battery, and then this battery also not only made from zinc. Now, besides zinc, also magnesium will be the prominent material, biodegradable material to be used. Okay, and we also have on the right. Okay. Over there. We have iron-based okay, metal oxide framework, none of vehicles, okay, where we load anti-gas or plug into that iron base so none of the vehicles. And this we are targeting okay, and then it can generate, as also made from polymer plus magnesium oxide, for example, zinc oxide. However, basically that despite their encouraging and appealing applications and also properties, okay, there are still some biocompatibility and safety concerns that scientists or researchers addresses. And then the some of the current limitation of this biodegradable metals, some of the limitation of the valuable metal in terms of their properties and also in terms of their performance, okay, and also limitation in their studies, okay, as well, is it is very difficult, basically, that it is very difficult to obtain to get the consistent and also to obtain a uniform corrosion rate, okay, at the entire sample for throughout the sample structure, okay. So it is this I think one of the most challenging challenging part lah, okay. Challenging factors in terms of the degradation is that very difficult for us to get a control or uniform corrosion throughout the structure, okay, of the metal itself, okay. And the second one is that, as per my review, that okay, the use the lack of in vitro SBF accuracy, because nowadays until now many SBF that be used for in vitro testing, for example, for corrosion degradation testing, for example, okay, most of them are using the less accurate punya SBF, okay, where for example, current SBF still don't have protein, for example, okay, inside as one of the compositions of the SBF, since that protein also having their main a large composition also inside the human blood plasma, okay, because as SBF, for example, PBS, okay, PBS, for example, are mimicking the blood plasma composition, right? Okay, so so the corrosion rate that we got maybe could be misleading, could be misleading, and not so accurate, okay. The other limitation, the other main prominent limitation for this in the research of a metal is the lack of standards and the long-term data. Okay, as shown here that, okay, only 44% of the research, okay, involve in vivo, okay, and the rest only stop at in vitro degradation test, something like that. Okay, and 44% ni, the most of them are magnesium, which is already past many clinical application and now already commercialized, right? Okay, so and for iron and zinc, still we are still limited study on in vivo. So if we don't have this insufficient in vivo long-term data and also the lack of standards, so the effect is that, okay, our result of corrosion degradations and also our biocompatibility test result also could be misleading, right? So this will affect our product performance. And then in terms of the regulatory also, if we are still lack of main standards or long-term data, so this will delay the delay confirmation, safety confirmation, or we call it macam CHOP lah, will delay the confirmation from the what we call it American standard ke, okay, kita panggil apa itu kan, so, FDA, sorry, will delay the consent from the FDA, for example, okay, if okay all of this occur lah, okay, so in terms of standard, we are having about 6 only standard, okay, And I think for the biological evaluation, we only have one standard, which is ISO 10993. ISO 10993 ni basically that it cover both lah in vitro and in vivo, right? For the medical devices, okay. And the rest will be on we only have and also we have ASTM F3268, okay. And then this one is for the corrosion testing. Okay, this one is for corrosion testing of absorbable metal, and so this is the latest STM that have been established. Okay, so
Sorry, Dr. Abdul Hakim,
yeah.
you have 2 minutes left.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for your
Remind.
info. Okay,
Okay.
and then these only 6 standards also, okay, make this make the you know I mean that this very only 6 standard ni, I think that could be problematic lah, could be problematic for the advancement of this valuable metal. Yeah, because this valuable metal only having about only start to be vigorously studied from the past 10 years. Okay, so for the so what's the engineer now, scientist now looks towards on what? So, okay, basically that for the future trends, we are embedding AI, okay, in order to have this, to predict or to model, okay, to extrapolate the performance, okay, of our implant, okay, based on the existing data that we got it. Okay, so you use AI, and also the common trending, the future trend. So now we try to fabricate our sample using 3D printing, okay, and also the use of simulation to simulate the corrosions, okay, and also all of us are now in towards designing a smart implant that can be sensed by using, for example, photo sensing, okay, pH, okay, sensitive or something like that. This is my research. Some of my research I did on most of iron, always trying to expedite corrosion rate of iron by, for example, coating with some plant-based coating. And also, I'm trying to load my bone scaffold from iron by cumin for anti-cancer, and also at the time to support the bone. Okay, so in conclusions, biomedical metal have been widely applied in many advanced medical devices application nowadays. Okay, and their development will be continued to be explored, okay, using the latest imaging technologies such as AI, smart implants, productions, to further enhance their efficiency and performance. Okay, so thank you very much. I think that's all from me. Okay. Oops.
Thank you very much, Dr. Abdul Hakim, for the inspirative
Okay.
presentation.
Okay, so
So
now
I
we
would like,
focus on
so I'd like to invite all the participants to ask some question. So all the participants, so please, you can directly ask to Dr. Abdul Hakim about his research by raise your hand, or you can type in the chat box. Okay, so Dr. Abdul Hakim, I would like to start with my question first. Yeah,
Okay.
based on your presentation, it's really interesting that you inform about the magnesium. It's currently lead the orthopedic application in medical activities. So maybe you can inform or share what's going on in Malaysia right now, yeah, with the biodegradable metals represent itself.
Oh, you mean in Malaysia?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Ibu Irma Kusumanti, for this, for the question. Okay, good question. Basically, that in Malaysia, right? The research, okay, in terms of research now, it is growing. Okay, it is increasingly grow in terms of the research. Okay, however, me and my friend also that work on these valuable metals are having some problems in terms of to bring these valuable metals into clinical applications. Okay. For example, research grants is already open in Malaysia, and some of my clique also got the grant to explore this. However, okay, our research is stop or not only stop lah. I mean that will be, up to in vivo, up to this up to today lah. I mean that up to this point, I can say that in Malaysia for valuable metals, now it is only up to in vivo, only in vivo. Okay, up to the in vivo. Okay, and we are trying our best now to convince all the physicians, all medical doctors, basically, right? And also to convince all the related medical devices, teams or institution or personals. Okay, so that we can bring this our fabricated samples, okay, far not far away, means that beyond the in vivo. Okay, means that we are still lacking of the clinical trials. Okay.
Of course, so it's still developed yeah, until right now,
Yeah,
Dr.
yeah,
Hakim.
yeah, Ibu. Not yet lah for the clinical.
Yes, thank you for your answer. So for the participants, is there any question? And I see your email address in here, Dr. Abdul Hakim. So please allow if there are some participants from this conference, would you like to ask some details about this topic, about your presentation right now?
Yeah, yeah.
We
Ya,
don't know.
Ibu Emma, and then Ibu Emma,
Yeah.
ibu-ibu dan bapa-bapa sekalian, and then I invite, okay, wholeheartedly, I invite to all of the audience, to all researchers from IPB also, okay, can contact me if you are very interesting,
Yeah.
even for potential student also to be involved in this biodegradable metal research, right? That can collaborate with me, okay? Can can collaborate with me, okay? For the betterment of this field also in terms of research. Okay, you are most
Okay.
welcome. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Abdul Hakim. So, ladies and gentlemen, all the participants, we are very happy that we have an open collaboration, yeah, from this session together with Dr. Abdul Hakim. And due to the limitation of time, I would like to conclude what you state about this topic. So the first one is the biodegradable metals represent a transformative direction in biomedical engineering. So in the biodegradable metals are strongly connected with the advancements of medical technology or the modern technology because their successfully application depends not only on the material science itself but also on material manufacturing technology, nanotechnology, biotechnology, digital engineering, and also smart medical system. So thank you very much once again, Dr. Abdul Hakim. We are very happy to having you in this session.
Thank you very
So
much juga,
yeah, on
IPB,
behalf
kena menjemput saya. Okay,
yeah,
terima kasih
on
banyak
behalf of
IPB.
the committee, yeah, we would like to say thank you and very good luck for your future career and looking forward for the future collaboration.
Yeah, thank you very much juga for PB, and also hopefully that the sharing just now will benefit all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Abdul
Terima kasih.
Hakim.
Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So, all the participants, we are moving to the next agenda after the invited speaker. So, I would like to invite the first presenter in this session. The first speaker will be Mr. Gagas. Yeah, with the topic effectiveness of the calcite precipitation method examined through variation and soil density.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. It's an honor to have the opportunity to effectiveness of the Skalsat precipitation method under variation in sand soil density. Sandy soil are extensively distributed across Indonesia. The widespread distribution of sandy soil presents a significant challenge in the construction sector. Sandy soil are characterized by uniform grain gradation and are classified as non-cohesive behavior. This non-cohesive behavior results in low shear strength, necessitates stabilization effort to enhance their shear strength properties. Cement is one of the most frequently used chemical for stabilizing sandy soil. However, the use of cement solution in soil can negatively impact because can pollute the environment and affect biological organisms in the soil. Therefore, it is essential to explore alternatives to cement as stabilizing agent for sandy soil, focusing on materials that are more environmentally friendly. Current research has focused on replacing cement with urease enzyme for soil stabilization. Urease acts as a biocatalyst and hydrolyzes urea to produce ammonium and carbonate ions, leading the formation of calcium carbonate precipitates. One soil improvement method that uses urease enzyme to generate calcium carbonate is microbially induced calcite precipitation. This method utilizes urolytic bacteria to produce urease. However, this method is difficult to control because of bacterial activity and complex growth method requirements. An alternative to using bacteria as urease enzyme produce is the use of pure urease. However, the large-scale use of pure urease enzyme is cost prohibitive. Therefore, the soybean crude urease calcite precipitation method was developed, which used soybean extract as a source of urease enzyme to reduce high cost. This method has been proven to be effective in increasing the strength of sandy soil at relative density of 50%. However, the effect of soil relative density on carbonate precipitation and the mechanical properties of the treated soil remain unclear. Therefore, further research is required to the application of the SUCP method under different relative density conditions in sandy soil. The objective of this study is to analyze the effect of relative density variation in sandy soil treated with SCUCP solution on soil permeability, calcite distribution, and unconfined compressive strength. Soil property tests were conducted to obtain data on the particle size distribution, specific gravity, and void ratio of the sand. The solution was prepared using the region and soybean concentration under the optimal condition determined from the precipitation test. The process began by determining the mass of the soybean and region for each variation in soil density. The region and soybean were dissolved in distilled water. The soybean solution was filtered through a number 400 sieve. The soybean, urea, and calcium chloride solution were mixed in the container to produce an SUCP solution. The sand test sample were molded using an acrylic cylinder positioned vertically. Once the cylinder was filled with sand, the requirement amount of SUCP solution was poured based on the specific variation in the soil relative density. The treated soil sample were cured for 7 days. Next, soil permeability tests were conducted to determine the soil permeability coefficient. The permeability test of sandy soil was conducted directly on sample placed inside a modified cylindrical acrylic mold after a 7-day curing period. Calcite distribution testing was conducted to determine the mass of calcite precipitates formed and distributed within the soil at specific density after treatment with the SUCP solution. The mass of the calcite precipitate was determined using an acid leaching method, and the procedure can be seen on the screen. Unconfined compressive strength testing was performed to determine the unconfined compressive strength of the sandy soil treated with the calcite precipitation solution for each variation in soil density after curing for 7 days using a cylindrical sample with a diameter of 5 cm and a height of 10 cm. Based on the grain size distribution graph of the sandy soil, the value for D10, D30, and D60 were determined, then used to calculate the coefficient of uniformity and coefficient of curvature, and the value were 2.88 and 0.81 respectively. According to the Unified Soil Classification System, the sand used in the study was classified as a poorly graded sand. Poorly graded sand is characterized by a uniform particle size distribution, which leads to a relatively low shear strength as a consequence of limited interlocking and weak interparticle cohesion. In this slide, we can see the table of sandy soil properties test results. From the data, it is clear that as the relative density increases, the void ratio tends to decrease. Denser soil exhibit a lower void ratio. This occurs because the compaction process reduces the void space, allowing them to be filled by soil particles. Based on the result of permeability tests, the water flow rate discharged from the testing mold exhibit varying value for each level of relative density of the sandy soil. Under treated condition, the water flow rate decreased with each increase in the relative density of the sandy soil. As soil becomes denser, the pore space within the soil decreases, making it more difficult for water to flow through it. After treatment with the SUCP solution, the water flow rate discharged from the mold after passing through the sandy soil sample showed a significant reduction. This is because calcite precipitate within the pore space, binding the sand particle together and increasing the soil density, which ultimately reduces the water discharge rate. For the untreated sand, the coefficient of permeability decreases with increasing relative density. This is because higher density results in reduced pore space, which restrict water movement through the soil. In the SUCP treated sand, a significant reduction in the permeability coefficient was observed. Calcite formed within the pore space and bond the sand particle together. The sand sample with a relative density of 50% exhibit the most uniform calcite distribution, owing to its low standard deviation value. The distribution of calcite in the sand sample was strongly influenced by relative density. In the sample with a relative density of 50%, the tilde pore space allowed in the SUCP solution to flow easily, resulting in more uniform calcite formation throughout the sample depth. In contrast, in the sample with a relative density of 90%, the narrower pore space limited the penetration of the solution into deeper layers, causing calcite to concentrate in the upper portion of the sample and decrease in the lower segment. This phenomenon was further exacerbated by a layer of residual soybean extract deposited on the surface of the sand sample, which hindered the solution from reaching the lower layers of the sand. The high UCS value was obtained for the sample with the high density. It is because denser sand has more contact point between particle surface, facilitating the calcite cementation process over shorter distance and thereby enhancing the strength of the soil. Consequently, the mechanical strength of the soil depends not only on the amount of calcite formed, but also on the arrangement and contact between soil particles. The unconfined compressive strength value obtained in the study were relatively low. This was because of the slight segregation at the bottom of the sample, which resulted in a weaker characteristic than those of the upper portion. This occurred because of the accumulation of sediment layer on the surface of the sandy soil sample, as the soil extract filtration process left behind some insoluble soy mass, which affected the distribution of calcite in the soil. Conclusion of the study are the permeability coefficient decreased as the relative density of the sand increased. A similar reduction in the permeability coefficient was observed for the treated sand samples. The sand sample with a relative density of 50% exhibit the most uniform distribution of calcite. The high UCS value was obtained for the sample with the high density, and the recommendation from the study are future research should focus on developing improved SUCP solution preparation method that minimize the residual salt content, and scanning electron microscope testing is required to identify the distribution and formation of calcite bonding within the soil at different sand densities. That's all from my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you for the next presentation. So I would like to open a question to all the participants to ask directly to Mr. Gagas. Okay, maybe start with my question, Mr. Gagas. I was wondering, how does the pore size distribution affect the calcite crystal formation? So would you explain more detail about it?
Sorry, could you repeat the question, please? My connection was a bit unstable earlier.
Okay. So how does the pore size distribution, affect the calcite crystal formation? So you mentioned the some size with your research in your methodology. So I was wondering, how does the pore size can distribution the effect of the calcite crystal formation? So maybe you can explain more detail the methods and how relations between the soil permeability. Sorry, Mr. Gagas, Okay.
Okay, thank you for the question. Maybe I can answer it because soil compaction reduce void space, causing void to be filled with soil particle. The particle, in the soil compaction reduce void space, causing void to be filled with soil particles.
And about the relationship, Mr. Gagas, the relationship between the soil permeability and also its the calcified precipitation efficiency, how it can be related.
Oh yeah. As you can see in the sample with a relative density of 50%, this tilde pore space allow the SUCP solution to flow easily, resulting in more uniform calcite formation throughout the sample depth. In contrast, in the sample with a relative density of 90%, the narrower pore space limited to penetration of the solution into deeper layers, causing calcite to concentrate in the upper portion of the sample and decrease in the lower segment.
Okay, so it has several methods before we conduct or before we measure about the soil permeability, and also to measure the calcified the precipitation efficiency itself. Yeah. Thank you for your answer. So if there is no question from the participant, I would like to move to the next speaker. Thank you, Mr. Gagas Afdal Madani. Good luck for your research and for your activity. And I would like to move on to the next speaker in here. Will be presented by Mr. Ahmad Saddam Hussein, and the topic is about the detection of HBCS and CD59 mutations and conducting in Sumatra, Sulawesi, and Java.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, distinguished speaker, respected researcher, and the participant. My name is Ahmad Saddam Hussein. I'm from Faculty of Biology, Universitas Gadjah Mada, Indonesia. Today, I would like to present my research molecular detection of the CD59 mutation in the HB2 gene among the population from Sumatra, Sulawesi, and Java using the ICRS-PCR-RFLV. The study focused on the molecular detection of non-deletion alpha thalassemia mutation, namely CD59 mutation in several Indonesia population. Thalassemia is one of the most common inherited blood disorder worldwide and remain a major global health problem. According to the World Health Organization, around 7% of the world population are thalassemia carrier, with approximately 300,000 affected births annually. In Southeast Asia, including Indonesia, data from the H-Man Institute reported that both alpha thalassemia type 1 and type 2 are frequently found in Indonesia population. However, non-deletion mutation, especially CD59 mutation in the HB2 gene, have not been widely explored in Indonesia population. This is the research question, research object, and research benefit. The study aimed to answer whether these RCP DNA sample carry CD59 mutation and how frequent these mutations are. This slide explains the theoretical basis of the study. CD59 mutation is classified as a non-deletion mutation in the alpha thalassemia globin gene. Especially, this mutation occurs at the codon 59, changing GGC into GAC, resulting in substitution of glycine into the aspartate amino acid. Based on this background, we hypothesize that CD59 mutation exists in the several Indonesia population and contribute to alpha thalassemia carrier case. This is the method overview. The study was conducted using the RCP DNA sample from the H-Man Institute. The research method consists of the research time, research allocation, and research subject. And namely, H-Man Institute RCP genomic DNA with the total of the 61 samples from a total of the 834 samples. This slide presents the material used in this study. The mainly material including RCP DNA sample, PCR reagent, agarose gel electrophoresis, DNA gestation for the RFLV analysis, and primers. The forward and the reverse primer sequence were designed based on the HB2 gene sequence reported by Nainggolan and the college. This slide shows the instrument used during the research. This instrument were used the DNA amplification, digestion, and visualization of the PCR product. This slide summarizes the overall research design. Samples were selected based on the hematological characteristics commonly associated with the alpha thalassemia traits, including the low MCP, low MCH. The research procedure consists of the several main steps. The first, hematological data were computerized and selected based on the alpha thalassemia carrier characteristic. And the second, DNA concentration and the purity were measured using the nanodrop. The third DNA publication was performed using PCR with the specific primer. Finally, PCR product underwent restriction, digestion, and electrophoresis analysis for the mutation detection. This slide presents the PCR reaction mix and the thermal cycling condition. After amplification, PCR products were digested using restriction enzyme TAC alpha 1. Digestion products were then separated using the agar-Rosgel electrophoresis, and then different band factor indicated the normal genotype, heterozygote mutation or homozygote mutation. This slide also show the expected electrophoresis band size for each mutation type. Data were analyzed descriptively, including the mutation frequency and the hematological profiles. This is the result. The results show that one sample from the Japanese population was positive for the CD59 mutation in heterozygote form. The positive sample code GW170 saw the following the hematological profile. The mutation frequency was approximately 0.53% among the analyzed Japanese sample. This finding indicates that CD59 mutation exists in Indonesia population, although at relatively low frequency. In condition, CD59 mutation was successfully detected in one Japanese sample. The detected mutation were heterozygote with a frequency of the 0.53%. This finding suggests the importance of expanding the molecular screening for non-thalassemia mutation in Indonesia. Further, the study involved larger population and additional ethnic groups are necessary, like the Betawi, Chinese, Indonesia population, like Papua population. Finally, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to the Universitas Gadjah Mada, Faculty of Biology, Eijkman Institute. Thank you very much for the attention.
Thank you,
Assalamualaikum.
Mr. Ahmad, for the nice presentation. So I would like to open question to the all participants. So please. And Mr. Ahmad, I was wondering that you use 61 blood sample selected.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how I mean you were using some participant from different places in Sulawesi, Sumatra, and also Javanese population. So how you divided the 61 blood sample selected from the all three different provinces?
Okay. Thank you for the question, Ibu Moderator, Ibu Ima. Good morning, distinguished speaker and participant. Why were only 61 sample analyzed of the 134 total sample? This is the sample I screening is a sample arsip from the Eijkman Institute. So in this institute have more sample from the Indonesia, from the Sumatra, Sulawesi, Java, Kalimantan, and the others. And we are in this research is more than one research, not only me. So I have I get the sample 61 from the all of the sample.
Okay, thank you. So it's already some team, or team member to conduct this research as well. Okay, thank you for your answer. And we also have a participant already raised hand, Mr. Sukarman Hadi Jayaputra. So please.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Miss Ima, for the opportunity. I'm Skarman from UGM, and thank you, Mr. Sadam, for the insightful and excellent presentation. I really learned a lot from your discussion. I appreciate the detailed explanation of the molecular detection method used in the research. Mr. Sadam, why did you choose the ACRS PCR RFLP method for detecting the CD59 mutation instead of using the right DNA sequencing? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Sukarman, for the question. Why I choose I use or I choose the ICRS PCR RFLEP method compare the conventional PCR, because the ICRS PCR RFLP method was used because the study focus on the detecting specific point the mutation. The namely is CD59 mutation. The conventional PCR alone cannot easily to 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 uh, to distinguish a single nucleotide substitution. So we need a more specific molecular method is required. The name is the PCR ICRS PCR RFLP. Because this technique, the primer I have to modify the created an RT-PCR restriction, so the enzyme can amplify the primer, and then after that PCR amplification, the product can different between the normal DNA and the mutant DNA. So the product will different the pattern why we use the ICRS PCR RFLP. Thank you.
Okay, so how it's answering your question, Mr. Sukarman?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you for your answering the question, Mr. Ahmad Sadam Hussein. So good luck for your research, and I think we can move to other speaker. Thank you once again, Mr. Ahmad Sadam Hussein. Yeah, and looking forward for the future collaboration between UGM and also IPB University. So for the next speaker will be Miss Shifa Fajrisani and her team, and she will talk about the nanoparticle-based facilitation strategy using ZNO enhances bioactive compound accumulation in adventitious root culture of Talinum japonicum. Yeah, so please.
Halo, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Siva Fajrisani. I'm from Universitas Andalas, Limongan, Spain. In this presentation, I will explain my research entitled Nanoparticle-Based Elicitation Strategy using DNO Enhanced Bioactive Compound Accumulation in Adventitious Culture of Talinum paniculatum junior. Recent development in nanotechnology have provided new opportunities to modulate plant growth and metabolism under control in vitro environment. Zinc oxide nanoparticle recently applied in plant culture systems because their nanoscale properties modify zinc bioavailability and cellular response. Nanoparticle exposure often modifies cellular redox balance by promoting the formation of roots. While excessive roots can impair cellular integrity, moderate roots production function as an important signaling mechanism that activates antioxidant defense and secondary metabolites between. Cellular redox balance is regulated by coordinated action of antioxidant enzymes, including superoxide dismutase, catalase, and ascorbat peroxidase. Adventitious culture offer a stable and efficient in vitro platform for secondary metabolic production, characteristic by rapid growth, genetic uniformity, and strong responsiveness to elicitor. Despite their advantage, the effect of zinc oxide nanoparticle oxidative status and antioxidant enzyme regulation in epithelial culture system remain insufficiently explored, particularly in tropical medicinal plants. Thallium paniculatum is enough species known to synthesis pharmacologically valuable, including saponins and stigmasterol. Although its phytochemical profile has been reported strategies to enhance metabolite accumulation using nanoparticle elicitation in adventitious culture are still limited. Material and methods: A. Plant material and culture condition. If eggplant were washed under running tap, water treat the mild detergent and surface sterilized using hypochlorite solution under aseptic condition, like this picture. And B. Of zinc oxide nanoparticle experimental design. Zinc oxide nanoparticles were purchased from CP Inovasi Teknologi Nano. Experiment using completely randomized design consists for concentration control 50, 100, and 150 mg per liter. See adventitious route elicitation and biomass determination. For week, all adventitious route 1 gram were transferred to liquid medium containing 2 mg per liter EPA and the respective ZNO concentration. Culture were maintained on a rotary shaker at 60 rpm in practice. The quantification of saponin and stigmasterol was carried out using HPLC. The determination of the BPS radical scavenging activity, oxidative stress marker, and antioxidant enzyme assays. Statistical analysis. And the result, one effect of zinc oxide nanoparticles on biomass accumulation. Fresh weight and dry weight, like figure 1, was significantly enhanced by zinc oxide nanoparticles. Control group exhibit the highest fresh weight, whereas treatment resulted significantly lowest fresh weight values. Fresh biomass declined to 1.18, 1.15, and 1.11 at 50, 100, and 150 mg per liters, respectively, with no significant differences among nanoparticle concentration and figure P. Similar trend here. Two effect of zinc nano-oxide nanoparticle on saponin and stigmasterol accumulation. ZNO nanoparticle elicitation significantly enhanced saponin and stigmasterol accumulation in adventitious culture of Thallium paniculatum, like table 1. With the control, all zinc oxide nanoparticles remain increased metabolite level with stringent response generally observed at 100 mg per liter. Effect of zinc oxide nanoparticles on DPS radical scavenging activity. Best feature, the NO nanoparticle elicitation significantly enhanced the DPS radical scavenging activity of adventitious culture compared with the control. 4. Effect of zinc oxide nanoparticles on oxidative stress marker. Zinc oxide nanoparticles significantly affected the level of MDA and hydrogen peroxide in adventitious culture. As we speak, in the figure 3, what oxidative stress marker increased substantially in response to zinc oxide nanoparticles treatment compared with control. All three enzymes exhibit marked response to ZNO nanoparticle treatment compared with the control. The effect of zinc oxide nanoparticles on antioxidant enzymatic activity. Zinc oxide nanoparticle elicitation significantly affect the activities of antioxidant enzyme superoxidase mutase, catalase, and ascorbic peroxidase in adventitious root culture. Conclusion: zinc oxide nanoparticles significantly affected growth, secondary metabolism, and antioxidant responses in adventitious root culture. Elicitation reduced fresh and dry weight biomass, indicating growth inhibition under nanoparticle industries. In contrast, saponin and stigmasterol accumulation increased markedly with the highest level observed at 100 mg per liter. Thank you everyone. Thank you for your attention.
Waalaikumsalam wabarakatuh. Thank you, Miss Shifa and team. I would like to open a question from the all participants. Is there some participant want to ask directly to Miss Shifa and her team? So, Miss Shifa, you mentioned about the fresh weight and also the dry weight, for the growth indicators in your research. So I was wondering, why you use fresh weight and also the dry waste to measure the growth indicators for your research? So sorry, you still muted. Would you please to unmute? Okay.
Okay, thank you, Ibu Ima. I will answer this question. Use fresh weight and dry weight because it involves growth parameter pertumbuhan.
Okay, so based on your research, you show some figures. So do the result suggest that the ZNO nanoparticles act more as a abiotic stress elicitors rather than growth promoters in the Paniculatum species?
Can you repeat again, Ibu?
Okay, yeah, based on your answer, yeah, about the phrase and also the dry weight before, I was wondering how do the result can suggest that the ZNO particles, the ZNO nanoparticles, sorry, can act more as an abiotic stress elicitor rather than growth promoters in the species Paniculatum.
Okay. Because various efforts have been made to increase the level of secondary metabolites in Japanese ginseng using different elicitors. However, the results obtained have not yet been optimal, reaching up to a twofold increase compared to the use of nanoparticles in other plants, which can result in an increase up to 10 until 11-fold.
Okay, so it can be measured, yeah, so it can be implemented. Okay, thank you, Mrs. Siva. I saw in the next presenter will be your and also your team, yeah, in here. So maybe some participant would have further question after the next presentation. Yeah. So the committee, would you please to help to move to the next speaker with Miss Siva Fajrisani, but with different topic ya Miss Siva ya. Okay.
Yeah, Ibu, different topic.
Okay, please.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone, my name is Siva Fajrisani. I'm from Universitas Andalas di Romanis Padang. Today I will explain my research entitled The Dependence Effect of Copper Oxide Nanoparticles on Biomass Secondary Metabolic Production and Physiological Stress in Paniculatum and Antibios. Recent development in nanotechnology have substantially broadened its application in plant biotechnology, particularly through the utilization of metal-based nanoparticle as abiotic elicitor capable of modulating plant growth, metabolic activity, and stress-related response. Among various nanomaterial, copper oxide nanoparticles have received considerable attention due to their physiochemical stability, redox active properties, and their dual function as essential micronutrient source and potential stress-inducing agent in plant systems. Copper is essential micronutrients involved in electron transport, redox regulation, and activation of antioxidant enzyme in plants. In nanoparticle form, copper exhibit enhanced bioavailability and reactivity compared to its ionic counterparts, which may alter cellular homeostasis and physiological response. Nanoparticle-induced oxidative stress is commonly characteristic by elevated level of protein oxida are hydrogen peroxide and molybdenum, which serve as indicator of growth in pellets and membrane lipid oxidation. To mitigate oxidative injury, plants activate enzymatic antioxidant system, including superoxide dismutase, catalase, and aspartate advantageous root culture repression and efficient in vitro system for investigating plants' response to abiotic aniston. Antalina paniculatum, or Japanese ginseng, is medicinal plant recognized for its valuable bioactive constituent, particularly saponins and stigmasterol. These compounds have been associated with antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, and immunomodulatory activities. Despite its pharmacological significance, information regarding nanoparticle mediated regulation of secondary metabolism and oxidative stress response in Talina paniculatum, especially within advantageous system, remains limited. Material and methods. 1. Plant material and culture plant condition. If expander surface sterilized by washing in detergent solution for 10 minutes, followed by 3 rinses with sterile distilled water, immersion in 10% sodium hypochlorite solution for 10 minutes, and 3 final rinse with sterile distilled water. And leaf segment culture in solid medium MS with 2 mg per liter indole 3 butyric acid. 2. Copper oxide nanoparticle mercoxen from CV Inovasi Teknologi Nano. And 3. Advantageous root elicitation biomass determination, for which all advantageous roots were exist and transferred into Erlenmeyer flask containing 50 milliliters liquid medium, supplement with 2 mg per liter indole 3 butyric acid. And then culture were maintained in darkness on a rotary observer at 60 rpm for 2 weeks. For extraction and quantification of saponin and stigmasterol carried using HPLC, 5. Determination of the PPS radical scavenging activity, 6. Determination of oxidative stress marker, and 7. Antioxidant enzyme assay. Next result 1. Effect of copper oxide nanoparticle on advantageous root biomass. Copper oxide nanoparticle elicitation significantly affect biomass production in advantageous root culture of Talina paniculatum. First, we decrease progressively with increasing nanoparticle concentration. And if we do dry wake exhibit a similar response pattern, the control treatment produces the highest dry biomass, whereas treatment with copper oxide 50 mg and 100 mg significantly reduce dry matter accumulation. 2. Accumulation of saponin and stigmasterol. Based on Figure 3 and Figure 4, saponin content increased markedly in response to copper oxide nanoparticle treatment, reaching a maximum at 100 mg per liter. This concentration results in more than a twofold increase compared with control. In stigmasterol accumulation follows a similar trend. The highest stigmasterol concentration was recorded at 100 mg per liter copper oxide nanoparticles, followed by 50 mg per liter. Also, stigmasterol level decreased at 150 mg per liter in non-significantly higher than those observed in untreated groups. And radical scavenging activity. Copper oxide nanoparticles significantly altered antioxidant capacity and in advantageous cultures. Maximum scavenging activity was observed at 100 mg per liter, followed by 50 mg per liter, but treatment showed pronounced enhancement relative to the control. For oxidative stress marker, polonium and hydrogen peroxide content were significantly influenced by copper nanoxide treatment, and they are content increased substantially at moderate copper oxide nanoparticle concentration with the highest radical chip at 100 mg per liter. A comparative trend was observed for hydrogen peroxide accumulation. Copper oxide nanoparticle treatment induced a concentration-dependent increase in hydrogen peroxide levels, peaking at 100 mg per liter. This result indicate enhanced oxidative activity in response to copper oxide nanoparticle exposure. 5. Antioxidant enzyme activities. Copper oxide nanoparticles elicitation significantly affected the activities of antioxidant enzyme in advantageous roots. Superoxide dismutase activity increased sharply with peroxide nanoparticle concentration reaching its maximum at 100 mg per liter. See at figure 7. Catalase and muscovite peroxidase activity exhibit peak value at 50 milligrams per liter, followed by gradual decline and higher concentration at 150 milligrams per liter. Copper oxide nanoparticles activity of altase enzyme decrease substantially, although they generally remain higher than those in untreated patient. Increasing concentration reduce press and dry biomass, indicating growth inhibition at high exposure. Growth suppression in linked to copper toxicity and boost overproduction, decreasing cellular metabolism. Antioxidant activity at moderate level reflect as metabolic synthesis. High concentration reduce antioxidant capacity. Oxidative stress exceeds cellular tolerance. Elevated MDA and hydrogen peroxide confirm reduction of oxidative stress. Thank you for your attention. Bye-bye. Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Mrs. Siva. So I would like to invite all the participants to ask directly to Mrs. Siva. So, Ms. Siva, yeah, based on your explanation, what is the main purpose of applying CuO nanoparticles to adventitious the roots? So, what is the main purpose of applying CuO nanoparticles? Please.
Okay, thank you for your question. I chose the copper oxide nanoparticle because this research is important to conduct as a foundation for effort to produce saponins and stigmasterol in vitro on a large scale and provide raw materials for anti-cancer drugs on industrial scale.
Okay, thank you for your explanation. So, is there any question from the all participants? So, please. Because the topic is really, I said it's really challenges, yeah, Miss Shiva. So, you conduct your research in Andalas University?
Yes.
Or you have other collaborate with other university, Miss?
No, only
Only
yeah.
from Andalas, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Miss Siva Fajrisani, with all the team member. So I would like to say thanks again and good luck for your research, for your future career. And I would like to move on to the next speaker, yeah, to the next participant in here, Mr. Raffi Wikrama Sahasika and his team. And the topic is about the molecular dynamics insight into the lipid 2 recognition for the antibiotic antimicrobial agents candidates. Please.
Good morning, my name is Raffi and I will be presenting about a research project entitled Molecular Dynamics Insight into the Lipid 2 Recognition for the Antibiotic Antimicrobial Agent Candidates, Cesin, Rombosin, and Nisin. We are from the Department of Chemical Engineering, University of Indonesia. Bacteria are living organisms that can cause disease through contamination. To kill bacteria, we need agents called antimicrobial agents. Examples of antimicrobial agents include preservatives and antibiotics. When exposed to antimicrobial agents, we expect bacteria to die. However, when bacteria are exposed to the low concentrations, they adapt to the antimicrobial agents and develop resistance. Bacteria develop several resistance mechanisms, one of which is by altering their body structure, rendering the antimicrobial agent ineffective. Worse, these resistant genes can be passed on the surrounding bacteria, resulting in a single environment filled with resistant bacteria. Although the bacterial body can change, there is one structure that is evolutionarily conserved, namely lipid 2, given the importance of this structure. As we can see, the structure of lipid 2 composed of 4 parts. First, C55, which is 55 carbons long. Second, sugar. Third, peptide. And the fourth is pyrophosphate, or 2P. It is important to remember that pyrophosphate is the main framework of lipid 2 because it connects sugars and peptides to C55. Therefore, this part is maintained evolutionarily conserved. Lipid 2 is closely related to the formation of peptidoglycan. The flow, lipid 2 is made intracellularly. Then, with the help of the flipase enzyme, lipid 2 is now extracellular. Lipid 2 has a peptide part. This will cross-link with other lipid 2 using the enzyme of topoisomerase. The result of this cross-link is repeating sugar and peptide called peptidoglycan. After this stage is complete, C55 and 1-phosphate will be reinserted into this intracellular space, and it is important to remember that this bacterium will continue to renew its peptidoglycan throughout its life. In addition, peptidoglycan must also be regenerated when the cell divides. This is the representation of where the lipid 2 outside the membrane cell looks like in bacteria. A variant of antimicrobial agent that is quite well known for its ability to target lipid 2 is nisin because it targets the most crucial part of lipid, namely pyrophosphate. This is the structure of nisin. Nisin's structure is characterized by the presence of non-standard residues such as dihydroalanine and dihydrobutyrin. It also contains a ring called thioether ring. Rings A and B binds to pyrophosphate in lipid 2, while rings C, D, and E form pores. Indeed, this dual mechanism makes this variant quite well known among several antibiotics. In 2023 and 2024, new variants called chesine and rhombosin were discovered. If we look at their structures, chesine is missing ring D and E, while rhombosin is missing ring E. Furthermore, there are several different residues compared to nisin. However, both literatures indicates a comparable antimicrobial activity. This is a gap of this research. Previous study only reported antimicrobial activity without addressing the molecular mechanisms. This study will attempt to answer the mystery of how the missing ring still exerts similar antimicrobial effects. As a first step before using the full membrane, this study will simplify how these three nisin variants interact with lipid 2 to gain a preliminary understanding of their interactions. For the nisin variants, we will use only the A and B rings as the sites that interact with lipid 2. For lipid 2, we will use only the pyrophosphate portion, known as the MPPI, as the site that interacts with the nisin variants. This study employed three mechanisms. First, structure preparation involves peptides taken from 1-WCO and mutated chesine and rhombosin using CHARMM-Dewey. Water and ions were then added using VMD with the size of 48 angstroms in every direction. 3-DMPPI was then added 15 angstroms from the peptide center of mass to increase the odds of interaction. After the system is ready, we run molecular dynamics in NAMD using the CHARMM-36M force field for 500 nanoseconds 4 times. Then, we conduct relative occupancy and RMSF analysis. RMSF analysis without the presence of the MPPI shows that the ring B of nisin is more fluctuate than chesine and rhombosin. This can happen because the ninth residue in nisin is proline, which makes ring B more flexible other than chesine and rhombosin. From the occupancy analysis, we can see different binding trends. Chesine and rhombosin interact primarily at ring A and are supported by ring B to maintain the presence of the MPPI, while nisin is supported by the side chain of residue 12 to maintain the presence of the MPPI. Here, we use relative occupancy analysis because the binding frames between nisin variants and the MPPI are very low, only about 10% of the total trajectory. This is the representation of the binding. In conclusion, chesine and rhombosin do indeed have a different binding modes compared to nisin. The effect of this difference in a binding modes cannot be fully determined until molecular dynamics analysis using full atom membranes is performed. Importantly, we now have a preliminary understanding of how the interaction between these nisin variants and the MPPI.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation, Mr. Rafli. I would like to invite all the participants to ask directly to the presenter. So maybe start with my question. When I saw your presentation, I quite confused about the lipid 2 what is it, like some symbols, So maybe you can inform to us what's the obstacle or what the challenges when you are doing this research, Mr. Rafli.
Okay, thank you for the questions. The main challenges when I conduct this research is the non-standard residues in our peptides, which is the hydroalanine, the hydrobutyrin, and two others non-standard residues that is connected by thioether rings. That is the main challenges in our research. And the second research is this is the first part of our research. The second part is we use full atom membrane to to get a better understanding of how the peptides, which is nisin, chesine, and rhombosin, interact with membrane. And we have to modify the lipid to C55 ring long manually. That is my answer, Miss Ima.
Okay, thank you. So other questions about the technology, that we can implement it. So how does the structural biology itself can we support the modern drug discovery, for example, with using lipid 2?
Sorry, what is the question?
Okay, so how does the structure, because you are showing some structure in your presentation. So how does the structural biology can support the modern drug discovery by using the lipid 2? It relates with the technology and the innovations.
Okay, so our target of drug is lipid 2, and our drug is chesine, nisin, and rhombosin. And our technology that we use in this research will be futurely contribute to the drug discovery because we can model the interaction between lipid 2 and chesine, nisin, and rhombosin and other medicine by computation, and we can determine the interaction with lipid 2. And among all the other parts of bacteria, lipid 2 is conserved and evolutionarily maintained, so the bacteria cannot change its structure in the lipid 2 part because it is very important in making the peptidoglycan structure. That is the answer, Miss.
Yeah. Okay. It's really interesting topic, and then I think it's not enough to discuss in only 5 minutes question and answer session. So thank you very much, Mr. Raffi Sasika. It's very new information, especially for me, and it's quite challenges. And good luck for your research. keep doing your research because it has a good future, yeah, as a modeling and can be implemented not only in Indonesia but also in other countries for the future. Okay, thank you very much and have a nice day. Yeah. Okay, all the participants, ladies and gentlemen, we are having the end of the session of this topic in the innovative technologies and biosource science and engineering. I am Ima Kusumanti as a moderator. Please allow me to say some apologies if there are some mistake or inconvenience to guide or leading for the session. So I will return back to our Master of Ceremony, Miss Dini. So hello Miss Dini, please.
Halo Ibu. Thank you very much Ibu Ima Kusumanti, SPMSC. We are so honored to have you as our moderator this morning. Thank you for your insightful guidance and invaluable insight in our parallel session on today. Unfortunately, we need to say goodbye to you now, but I hope we can meet and collaborate with you in another opportunity. And to all distinguished audience, we will now take a short break. Please kindly fill in the attendance form displayed on the screen. The link has also been shared in the chat box. We will resume at 1:30 p.m. So please rejoin this Zoom by then. Before you leave, please make sure you have completed the attendance form. The Google Form link was shared earlier in the chat by our committee. I'll see you again at 1:30 p.m. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you.
Thank you, Mbak.